Today we're going to show you the top 5 calibers for hunting in Montana. Hi, welcome back to the LocaCarnivore again, the channel for smart people, and we know you're smart because you're watching us. Hey, just a quick reminder, give us a big like on this video. Go down, ring that bell, make sure you get notified of every time we have a video coming out. Don't forget to share this video. Let's make this thing go viral. Send it to your friends, even the people you don't like. Send it out to them. We'd also like your suggestions as to what sorts of videos you'd see in the like to see in the future. Also, we need your support, so we have a link down there in the description for Patreon, so we'd appreciate it. Go on over there. At the appropriate support level, you'll get a free book. Here's a picture of the cover. Don't forget to comment, and don't forget to stay through the whole video. We've got stuff all the way through this that you're going to want to see, that you'll want to know about if you're planning on hunting in Montana. So what are the top 5 calibers, i.e. cartridges, for hunting in Montana? Hunting in Montana is, for a lot of people, a bucket list hunt. Maybe you're one of the gazillion people that have decided to relocate to Montana, and you want to know what to bring as far as a hunting rifle and type of cartridge to use. So we're going to give you all the information on that. We're going to show you the top 5, at least in my opinion. Yeah, some people are going to get left out. I'll tell you that right now. Your favorite cartridge might not be on this list, but that doesn't mean it's not necessarily a good cartridge. But if you do get left out, it's not for lack of trying. It's just we had to pick 5, and these are the 5 we came up with. Now, of course, I'll let you know right up front, there is no Creedmoor cartridge on this list. And, well, we got a visit from the Creedmoor people, the International Brotherhood of Creedmoor Shooters, and you can see them here. They pulled up in their van. The president of their organization gave me a very stern talking to, and I told him, well, hey, sometime in the future we'll try to do a video on the Creedmoors. But for now, we just felt it make the list. So how do you go about picking a cartridge for hunting in Montana? Well, very simply, Montana is a rather complex place to hunt. There are basically 2 different states. There's 2 different Montanas. There is the east side of the Continental Divide, and then there's the west side of the Continental Divide. And those 2 environments are quite different. There's a little bit of overlap, but they're still very different environments, and they lend themselves to somewhat different cartridges. However, the 5 we picked, we tried to get ones that would, for the most part, translate to either part of the state. And there's also the issue of what kind of animal are you going to hunt up in Montana, because there is a wide variety of game animals available. And I'll just tick off the list real quick. Mountain lion, mountain goat, bighorn sheep, mule deer, white-tailed deer, pronghorn antelope, elk, moose, black bear. And let's not forget, you're going to be in bear country in Montana, so you might meet this grumpy fellow. So you need to have, it's not a bad idea to have a cartridge that would be useful for that. And don't forget to check out our video. We'll give you a card to it later on in the video for our other video on how to make a bear defense and wilderness survival chest rig that you might find handy if you decide to hunt in Montana. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the eastern slope, if you will, the east side of the Continental Divide in Montana, is primarily the rolling plains areas, and it's interspersed with mountain ranges such as the Crazies and a few of the Belt Mountains, a few other mountain ranges. They're dotted here and there on what's essentially a more rolling version of South and North Dakota. This area is what gave Montana its nickname Big Sky Country, because it's just, you can see forever out there. The problem is the animals can see you as well, especially if you're hunting pronghorn. So cartridges that tend to work a little better on the east side of Montana are going to be cartridges that shoot relatively flat, and have good resistance to wind drift because it's always blowing in eastern Montana. The other thing on eastern Montana is you're still able to hunt most of the species that you would find in western Montana, but the eastern Montana plains are fantastic country, particularly for pronghorn antelope, a lot of mule deer, and there's whitetails depending on your elevation and what part of the terrain you're in. Black bears are available, but they're maybe not quite as plentiful as in the western part of the state. There is elk, usually in the various little mountain ranges that dot the landscape, and but not so much on moose. Now in western Montana, it's quite a bit different. It is heavily timbered. It is much more mountainous, although the mountains are cut by glaciated, flat, generally wide valleys with very wide rivers, and the mountains are broken up by what in Colorado would be called parks, and these large glaciated plains such as the Camas Plain, 9 Mile Prairie, other areas like that. So you're going to have a mix of terrain, and depending on where you're hunting, if you're going to hunt perhaps on private property, which is often on one of the larger ranches, those can be actually quite open terrain, and you might have shots that are out 400 or 500 yards, even a bit more, depending on where you're at and how the layout of the land is. But often you're going to find yourself in very deep, thick timber on relatively steep mountainsides, and you're either going to be shooting at very close range, I'm talking 10 yards, 15, 20, maybe 50 yards. There are parts of Montana where the forest is so thick you just can't see more than about 10 yards at a time. And you're also going to be shooting through very narrow lanes, potentially in the timber in between trees. So you're only going to see parts of the animal that you're shooting at. So make sure you're getting the right animal, both gender and age and antler size and everything else that you have to be, and species, etc. So be very careful about that. But western Montana, as I said, is very heavily forested. So the cartridges that lend themselves to that, you don't necessarily need the reach, although it's good to have, because occasionally you'll step up somewhere, you'll get up higher and maybe out into a logging cut or something, and there might be something 200, 300, 400, 500 yards away, either across a draw or across a logging cut, that you might actually have to shoot that far out. And as I said, if you're down on the flats, in the river bottoms, in the valley areas there, you might again have to shoot quite a ways. So we need, again, that flexibility for each cartridge. So number 5 on our list is the 25-06 Remington. Alright, I don't have a 25-06 to show you, but here on the right is a 5.56 by 45 IA223, and right next to it on the left is a 30-06. So if you can imagine, the 25-06 is based on the 30-06 case. So if you can imagine this cartridge neck down to a 25 caliber bullet from a 30 caliber bullet, you'll have a 2-25-06 in mind. Now that cartridge has been around for quite some time, decades and decades, and it is an excellent cartridge, and it typically shoots bullets in at most about the 125 grain range, but most bullets are typically going to be right around 100, 110, 115 grains depending. Now the 25-06 we picked as the preferred cartridge for, and you can use this all across the state, but it tends to lend itself a little better to the eastern slope, and this will be your cartridge for pronghorn, whitetail, and mule deer. It can be used for elk. People do use it for elk, but its energy, especially downrange when you get out there like into the about 400 or 500 yard mark, it's a little on the light side in my opinion for elk. The 25-06 also proves to be an excellent cartridge for bighorn sheep and mountain goat. So if you're anticipating a hunt up high and you're looking for one of those species, again, your shots could be kind of long. Now the 25-06 is not noted for having high ballistic coefficient bullets, but the fact of it is the velocity on the projectile is so high that it just simply gets to the target before the wind really has a major chance to work on it. So that's why I still say this is a good cartridge for out on the eastern plains. It is unique in that it is the flattest shooting, hardest hitting, yet lowest recoiling cartridge made. And that it still surpasses the 6.5 Creedmoor, excuse me, the 6.5 Needmore, I mean, something in my throat, I mean the 6.5 Man Bun. It still surpasses that cartridge in my opinion for that use. 25-06, I give it an effective range of about 410 yards for deer-sized animals. Elk, it's going to depend on a lot on placement and presentation. I wouldn't trust it for anything other than a clear broadside shot. And you're probably going to want to be 300 yards or less, quite frankly. Max point blank range on the 25-06 is right around 300 yards. Like I said, this thing is just, it's a laser beam. Yeah, there's cartridges that shoot just a little flatter than this thing, but they're kind of boutique-y, Weatherby, and they may be hard to find, but the 25-06, like I said, it's max point blank range, 300 yards, which is fantastic. On the right, it's a 5.56 by 45, and on the left is a 308. Gives you an idea of size. Let's talk about the 308 Winchester. Fantastic cartridge, been around since the 1950s, and I kind of was on the fence about this. Do I go 308 or 30-06? Except for the extreme 5% of hunting you might do with it. The 308 will do just about anything the 30-06 will do. It's almost equivalent ballistically and has the big advantage of it's available. 308 is everywhere. Even during the height of the ammunition shortage, you could still get 308. So that's why I settled on the 308. 308 effective range for deer-sized game is 500 yards, and for elk right around 400 yards. Its max point blank range is about 250 yards. On the right here, we have a 5.56 by 45 IE223, and on the left, we have a 7mm Remington Magnum. Gives you an idea of the relative size. Now, going beyond the 308's power level and range envelope, again, there's a lot of cartridges out there to choose from, but we settled on the 7mm Remington Magnum. Cartridge has been around since roughly the early 1960s. It's a proven cartridge. It's taken, well, it's taken everything except the Big Five around the world, and it is, by sales volume, the most popular cartridge in the world for sales. And again, like the 308, you should be able to find ammunition for this thing just about anywhere you go. Now, the 7mm Remington Magnum, it's getting kind of in the area of like treading on the heels of a 300 Winchester Magnum and the 300 Magnums and that sort of thing. And yes, the hotter 6.5s could do the same job, arguably just as well, perhaps not as well, it just depends. But we went that 7 Magnum. So that 7mm Remington Magnum, like I said, is available everywhere. It shoots very flat. Your max point blank range on this thing is going to be about 295 yards. That's just a few yards shy of the 25-06's max point blank range. So this thing shoots super flat. It is a fantastic cartridge for out in the open or shooting across a draw or a valley. And our cartridge guide lists the 7mm Remington Magnum's max effective range at 700 yards for deer-sized animals and about 550 for elk. You, with the right bullet, might be able to push that out to 600 yards. But again, fantastic cartridge. You can shoot it, use it in the western part of the state as well. You know you've got that reach, but it hits hard enough that if you're up close, you can certainly use it on just about anything. And so don't be afraid to take a 7mm Remington Magnum to Montana. On the right, 5.56 by 45. And on the left, 375 H&H Magnum. Well, number 2 on our list of calibers / cartridges for hunting in Montana is the proven, tried and true, and, well, my personal favorite, 375 H&H Magnum. That's Holland & Holland Magnum. This thing's been around since 1912. It has, without any argument, taken every single game species from small to mega large on this planet, elephant on down. It'll do everything. And I recommend it for Montana because, well, it's just one of the best all-around cartridges ever developed. Your effective range for this cartridge is going to be around 500 yards or so for deer-sized animals, and it's used for plains game in Africa all the time at those ranges. And I'd start cutting it off at about 400 yards or so for elk, simply because that large bullet, even if you're using a fairly high BC bullet like an AccuBond or something, it's going to lose enough energy to where by the time you get there at 400 yards, it's getting a little marginal for elk, but not bad. Plus, but given its sectional density, its propensity for deep penetration, and the fact it just causes immense wounds when it gets there, it's perfectly fine on elk. This is the cartridge, in my opinion, for the western part of Montana. If you need something that can drop something up close and just delivers a heck of a lot of energy so the thing's not going to run off and get lost in all the undergrowth, then the 375 is definitely for you. And it's a proven stopper should you end up in a toe-to-toe dance with a grizzly bear. Definitely is something to give you a little bit of confidence to have one of those in your hands. Max point blank range on the 375 H&H with a higher BC bullet, figure about 250 yards. Again, perfectly adequate. This cartridge has more than enough reach for most hunters in most situations, although it's a little challenged if you're out there in a really open country and you have to make a super long shot. On the right, you have a 5.56 by 45 IE223. Here on the left, we have a 300 Winchester Magnum. And finally we get to the #1 cartridge for hunting in Montana, and that's the tried and true 300 Winchester Magnum. The 300 Winchester Magnum is without a doubt one of the most versatile hunting cartridges ever developed. It may not hit quite as hard as the 375 H&H, but it hits substantially harder than the 7mm Magnum or anything with lesser power potential. The 308, the 30-06, any of those conventional non-Magnum cartridges, 300 Win Mag will outdo them no matter what. So this is a great cartridge if you're hunting up close. I've used it many times on deer, whitetails, and mule deer, and at even 30, 40, 50 yards in the heavy timber, it's still a good cartridge, and it anchors these animals, puts them straight down as a general rule, and so they don't run off and get lost in all that undergrowth. But it has enough reach. Max point blank range on the 300 Win Mag, right around 280 yards. That's really in the territory of the 7mm Mag, and maybe it's not as good as the 25-06, but it's still substantially out there. Anything out to that 280 or so, 285 yard mark, you're not going to have to recalculate your scope. And I've used it on pronghorn antelope, and it's been marvelous. So it's not too much power. If you use the right bullet, got to use a proper controlled expansion bullet. That's the key here on these Magnums, so that you don't blow up these smaller animals and turn them into hamburger. But use a good bullet like an AccuBond, Partition, Trophy Bonded, any of those bullets, and that's just to name a few. That's not to shill for any of them, just to name a few off the top of my head. Those bullets will dump just enough energy in the animal that it will go down and it will be terminated quickly, but at the same time you're still going to have plenty left over to eat, and you're not going to have to pick bullet shards out of everything. The same goes with the 375 H&H or any of these other cartridges we're talking about. Use a proper controlled expansion bullet. However, I've used even conventional bullets with the 300 Winchester Magnum, and it's still performed just fine on antelope and deer. It might give you a little larger exit wound than you might want, but it's still not too bad. Maximum effective range, or reasonable effective range, on the 300 Winchester Magnum, look for about 715 yards for deer-sized animals. That's a long reach out there. And about 685, 690 yards for elk. And frankly, with the right bullet, the 300 Winchester Magnum will be a genuine elk slayer out to 1,000 yards. Not recommending you shoot out that far, quite frankly, but if you have to and you use the right bullets and you have the right skill set, this cartridge will do it. You don't have to have any of the Ultra Super Magnum Blaster Gizmo laser beam Destructo Ray cartridges out there that eat your barrels and all that sort of stuff. This proven cartridge, which is readily available on the shelf anywhere you go, will do just fine. So it's a great cartridge. It's, in my opinion, the all-around cartridge for Montana. It's heavy enough to deal with bears. It is heavy enough to deal with elk and moose, but it still has enough precision and enough controlled ferocity, if you will, that it can be used on the smaller species as well, and very effectively, and it's got that reach that you're going to need. So that's our list of the top 5 cartridges for hunting in Montana. Sorry if we skipped over somebody's pet cartridge. Just feel free to go down in the comments and put your hate in there, whatever you want to do. But again, we thank you for taking your time watching us here at LocaCarnivore. Stay aware, stay safe, be kind, and we'll see you next time on LocaCarnivore.